I'm wondering at this point if anyone actually listens to this bit or skips to the meat of the podcast, because you know what it's all about. So if you do listen to the whole thing, well, this bit's for you. If this by some mad chance is your first ever episode, I'm sorry, you're not going to have a clue what's going on. Listen to another episode first.
Hi, Toby. It's thanks for having me on. For the multitudes out there who don't know me, my name's Jeremy Radick, and I played Gareth in the Doctor Who TV movie. And for the past 25 years, I've been shamelessly exploiting that to get me into exciting predicaments like this. And now it's brought me here to my basement to talk to you about Inferno.
Well, hello everybody. I'm sure there's an alternative universe version of me who has managed to set up this recording session in minutes rather than in the several hours I always seem to end up taking. Anyway, without further ado, I want you to press play or unpress pause, depending on how you're doing this, on episode 4 of Inferno. So, as you might be able to tell from my introduction, because this is a new recording session, I stopped after episode 3, and some days have passed, and sadly in those days that have passed, Roy Scammell, who I eulogised amongst his Havoc mates, and I was berating myself for so doing, because Jeremy Radick, my special guest, had not chosen them for this particular episode, so I didn't get points for this silly piece of frippery that I'm doing. Roy Scammell at the age of 88, but I thought he'd make 100. Roy Scammell sadly passed away, so I've been spending the interim writing obits and doing a bit of research on Roy, who I knew. I actually phoned him not that long ago during the plague because somebody wanted to write an article for Doctor Who magazine. I wanted to be put in touch, and I would never put somebody in touch without checking with them first. So I had a chat with Roy. So we'll no doubt talk about him because, I'd like to say it's with some sort of apposite timing, because when I did the Robots of Death recently, I then had to add a thing saying, and since that was recorded, David Bailey has died. I did the 11th Hour, and since that was recorded, Arthur Cox died. And now this one, since this Roy Scammell has died. But as a friend of mine pointed out, if you watch programs from ages ago, people are going to die from them quite often. And so I'm reading nothing into it, apart from the fact it's a sad fact of my life and our lives as fans of Doctor Who that our heroes depart from us. But haven't we been lucky to have had access to them and heard their stories? And Roy was great. Roy was not your typical stuntman. He was very softly spoken, very gentle, always sunbathing in his swimming trunks. In fact, to do a bit of research for Roy, I've written Roy's Guardian obituary. They asked me to chase up if I could find some photographs, and I have to say I did a bit of a Google, and he'd done some modelling for gym magazines. I don't think everybody who got those magazines was necessarily into the gym, and in those sessions he also did some where it was obviously a gym where underwear was seen as somewhat gauche. Goodness me, I saw more than I bargained for. One of them, I'd have had your eye out. But anyway, so the things that one does when researching Doctor Who. Anyway, God bless you, Roy. He jumped off a crane at the age of 80. So here we are, in the Inferno. I love this dangerous world that John Pertwee finds himself in. And Olaf Pooley is such a convincing bad guy as Stallman. Ungrateful Nitwit is a great. It's a wonderful. Bert was very good at being sort of childish. Actually, he is by far the most sort of dignified and dandified Doctor. But Nitwit is such a childish thing. It would seem right for Patrick Troughton, but it's even more right for Pertwee because it's so sort of incongruous. And yes, when I was first read about this story, it was always the parallel world stuff was added as an afterthought, but it wasn't really. It was it may well have been that Don Horton had come with this drilling story, and this was raised in conference to sort of sex it up, but it wasn't that they had scripts and then stuck 3 new episodes in the middle. It wasn't quite like that. But it does make this very special. And I have to have an eye on what the wonderful Jeremy Radick, who is my special guest, has chosen. I like the first glimmers of the Liz Shaw that we know. She's still very hard-faced, Caroline John, but she's just got a little glimmer of, what could have been. And I do like the idea, because sometimes when you have, mirror universe episodes, it is just so-and-so's actually bad. But what I think is much more interesting about this is that Liz obviously has this latent goodness within her, but she's working for a fascist security force. And would you? I sometimes find, certainly in discourse these days, where people yell at the past, as it were. You think, well, you've cast yourself as a hero in a story you're not actually in, and if you were there, what would you do? I think it's much more interesting not to look at heroes and villains, but what is within us all that civilization keeps in check. And I think that throws up interesting questions, as well as sort of having the fun of the story. And isn't Sutton just a hero? I like Sutton, and Sutton's the slightly unreconstructed, rough and tumble kind of guy, but he's the one who's actually most entrenched in his own decency. He's probably not, smart and saluty, and he's not lovey-dovey with Petra either. He's still quite sort of harsh and pragmatic with her, but it's an earthy pragmatism that's sort of entrenched in decency. Now, Terence Dicks always used to do the story, the observation that John Pertwee's hair got more bouffant. He looks like a Bond villain here. Olaf Pulius-Stallman with his never trust someone who wears sunglasses inside. I don't know who told me that. I don't know. Though I could think of a few Doctor Who people I quite like who've worn sunglasses inside. Paul Joyce, who directed Warrior's Gate, I seem to recall wore tinted glasses. But he does look like he should be smoking a Gulwar and drinking Nescafe on a chintz ocean liner, or playing Mastermind. And I haven't noticed that before. He's tapping his glasses there, sort of in the way that he tapped the notepad when he was Testy Stallman in our universe. And sometimes this can be a bit pony. Somebody clutches their heads and has an alien thing going on, but that harsh, intense drilling sound, I think, actually really makes it work. And this is great Douglas Camfield type stuff with these huge close-ups. This and the sweaty Pertwee with the light on him. This is, anyone that's sort of seen war films and that kind of thing would recognise this as being sort of relatively sort of grown up stuff. This is at the high end of the adultometer in terms of what's allowable on Doctor Who. It's and Pertwee looks like he's really been through it. But yes, he's not particularly bouffant at all here, although he does have an impressive head of hair. But yes, Terence Dicks always used to delight in doing the story about John's hair gets more bouffant as he carries on. So I wonder if that's Pertwee settling more into himself, because I think actors do that when they. It's funny when you start to play a part. I've done this recently. You sort of try and remove yourself from it as much as possible. I think that's a bit naughty sometimes, because that's a bit sort of, oh, look what I can do. And the best direction I ever had, actually, from somebody I'd never worked with before, was sort of like, don't, if you're a good actor, but you don't need to show us that. And I thought that was a salutary lesson of going, yeah, that's very true. Don't show you working, because that's when you're just not being the person instead, but you're showing off a little bit. And this is great. This is all very sort of naturalistic for Doctor Who, sort of harsh. And Courtney's loving being mean, and that's what I mean about when you're an actor. Nicholas Courtney was the nicest man imaginable, and very straight and very decent. But he must have had a great time, and indeed he did, because he always talked of this story fondly. And indeed, this is the birth of the eyepatch story. And I like this because instead of denying it, Stallman sort of calls the Doctor's bluff, but he's got bandages underneath, so he sort of has his cake and eats it there, really. But the lighting in this story is so good. It'll be interesting to watch, because it was always very much written up as, Camfield didn't like what Letts had done with this, and he would liked it to have been darker and more nightmarish. And I think when I first saw this, I assumed that, it was mostly Camfield and Letts just jumped in at the end. But actually, Barry Letts directed more of this than Douglas Camfield did. Really. Security is my responsibility. I like the way that he does that. He picks up on the word of his... Yeah, this is the Doctor. There's a good publicity photo of these two here. I actually sent that to Olaf Pooley. I sent it to his art gallery. I got an address for somewhere and sent some dollars to cover the postage, but I never got anything back. But then, I think I've mentioned before, some friends of mine doorstepped him and got a signed photo for me. So that was very nice. Thanks, Ben and Lee. I love Petra and Greg Sutton. Yeah, he's not got his cravat on in this universe. He's very much a tie man. Here is Roy. There's Roy Scammell. Rest in peace, Roy. Bless you, mate. So Roy, how appropriate he gets credit on this episode. Not because funny, because he doesn't get the credit for doing the Fall last episode, does he? No. But he gets a couple of lines in studio here, and gets picked up by the Prime by Bromley, doesn't he? And thrown. But yeah, Roy had his shocker blonde hair there. And I didn't realise he actually came from his dad was a part-time sort of model actor and stuntman, and his brother was a Shakespearean actor who worked in America, Terence Scammell. So he's, you sometimes imagine that all stuntmen are sort of hewn on the meat market at where Covent Garden or whatever it is, but actually Roy was from quite a sort of theatrical background, but he was an ice skater, and he used to practice jumping barrels as an ice skater, and it was ice skating that got him a lot of his first sort of stunty sort of stuff. And he was told he had to do a fall on a film, and he did it, and he's slowly got the reputation of being the fall guy. He was as fit as a butcher's dog, he was. And I like the sort of the savagery of Benton, and John Levine does it well. John Levine, I mean, I am a big fan of Sergeant Benton, but it's good to see him being now they're doing the good cop bad cop, which I like the way she acknowledges it. But this is great, because this is what the Doctor is doing here is he's trying to stop a countdown to the end of the world. And the brilliant thing is, you know, as a viewer, you sort of know that the world's not going to end in Doctor Who set in. Excuse me, whenever Doctor Who is set. Don't get me started on the unit dating theory, and I don't mean that night out I had with Captain Yates. And I love the shooting of this and the light through the bars and lots of close-ups. Not afraid of close-ups, and you know they're great on this big screen that I'm watching on. But that would have been a real bonus on the smaller tellies of the time as well. I'm sure somebody wrote to Doctor Who magazine and asked about an episode ending they'd remembered, and it was the Doctor in a cell, and when he went to sleep, you know, a horrible hand coming out from under a blanket, and of course they say, oh no, it's not an episode ending, it happened in Inferno. So there's a memory cheating for whoever that was. It could be that I've misremembered that thing in Doctor Who magazine. So I think somebody had remembered this and thought it had been an episode ending, which it hadn't. But it's a great moment, and it's a segue. It's a journey via disco ball back to a lovely close up. I think, isn't it right that Caroline John's hair is never the same in any of her Doctor Who stories? That shows. That shows you can be a scientist from Cambridge, but you still got time to experiment with your hair. I think Liz really works as a companion. I mean, I love Jo, and I could see why Barry Letts decided that having a scientist with the Doctor was not quite the correct dynamic. But and she was, you know, I think applause to the show for having a go at doing that and stepping away from, I suppose, what we see now as the cliche. But you know, I think that it's fine for the show to shake up the Doctor companion dynamics every now and again. And I think Pertwee works well with all of his co-stars. He's so reasonable, Sir Keith, and Stallman is such an arse. And that bowler hat, Sir Keith's got a bowler hat. That's a thing you don't see now, is it? Sort of bowler-hatted either city gents or government ministers. And is the world a better place without them? I'm not sure that it is. And it's good because this is helping with the countdown thing, because Sir Keith going away, and we don't know yet that Stallman has tried to stall his progress. Sir Keith going away adds a little bit of jeopardy of Willie, and we don't see this, and you probably would now. You'd sort of cut away to a bit of Sir Keith's journey. The budget would be such that you could afford to follow Sir Keith's little subplot more so than that one scene in the car in a couple of episodes' time. One episode's time, yeah, next week. I love that shot of this shot of Sir Keith and Stallman in the foreground, and Liz and the Brigadier watching in the background. The framing slightly off there because Stallman's moved, but it's cracking setup there, and the sound in the background is great. And of course, at the time, all of this stuff about, you know, stuff that we take for granted. We've just had our electricity bill. It's going, blimey. But then actually, when you think about it, you know, getting things like the power, a simple thing like that, because power cuts and all that sort of thing were, you know, even when I was a kid, they were a big thing. And things that we take for granted, and power and things that we haven't sorted out, like litter and rubbish and waste. You know, I think the fact that they all start to become concerns of Doctor Who at this time makes them really, really interesting. And one, I think it's laudable. I think Doctor Who's primary purpose has to be to entertain. But if it wants to tackle a subject, I think it's fantastic that it does so. Roy Scammell's getting a line. Roy didn't get many speakers, he falls off something in Ambassadors of Death, and he gets a credit there because it's brilliant because you see him land, which is a great piece of direction. I'll talk about that when we do Ambassadors of Death. Another brilliant story. But Roy basically gets lifted there, which is a fairly straightforward but still a nice, good-looking stunt. So I think Roy's been killed by Ian Fairbairn now. Oh dear. And now he's going to bend the bars, which is terrific. And of course, because their touch is so dangerous, that makes them a thrillingly terrifying villain. That's a great shot through the bars. Although I know that if I was watching this with one of my family, they would go, well, if you could bend those bars, why couldn't he bend the other bars? And I would go, well, he used up all his strength bending those bars, so he can't bend these bars. But which is why I stopped watching Doctor Who with other people, because you can't enjoy a moment without people going, which is how most people talk, by the way. People who don't like Doctor Who talk like this. They go, and you go, look at that brilliant thing of Doctor Who, or I like a thing. Oh no, it starts to sound like a cat starting a motorbike. But yeah, I'm sure this is a running theme with this. Non-Who fans picking up on stuff not being very good that never occurred to me to look at as a problem. But there we go. Gosh, and isn't it? I wonder how I'd be interested to see how our computer screens and readouts look, because I mean some television programs now they have tables with sort of iPhone type displays, or they have them in the like holograms above the desk and all that sort of thing. So they're an attempt to make stuff look really futuristic, and they're at the cutting edge. But of course they're going to date. So I wonder how iPhones and things like that will seem quaint in 30 years' time to viewers. There going, oh, look at them. They thought that they thought that a device that could do everything. Well, no, they thought iPhones could do everything. They didn't even anticipate that you could eradicate a species and have a milkshake from the device that you talk to people out of. Because you can't. If you could anticipate the future, you'd be an inventor, not a television writer. Well, television writers are very inventive, but you know what I mean. If we knew what the future amazing inventions would be, we'd have invented them. And I suppose Doctor Who predicts some stuff as well. Oh yes, this is going to be Derek Newark, yeah. And I think the fact that Greg Sutton is a sort of tough guy, the fact that he's scared stiff, really underlines it, and he's really the only one that can sort of show, what danger they're all in, because of course the others, the fascists, aren't allowed to. They have to toe the party line. And coming up, I think is one of the great Doctor Who cliffhangers. I think it's absolutely superb. And I think they've established this world brilliantly. And I feel that the Doctor is in real peril here. This is real, genuine jeopardy. Just for the fact that a normal citizen of this world is in huge total jeopardy. But because he's this fish out of water, and because Starman in our universe is a dangerous guy, but only because he's got the bureaucracy on his side. This one is a dangerous guy who's where the bureaucracy isn't done by pen and ink. It's done by Luger and handcuffs. And of course the doctor's going to the doctor's going to try and appeal to reason. Is this where he has the fantastic line? Yes, Greg Sutton being heroic, I love it. And Pertwee is great and powerful, and this line is fantastic, isn't it? It's the sound of this planet screaming out its rage. Yes, I love that, don't you? And of course, so Greg, the usefulness of having Sutton there is that he gets to do the heroic thing. And brilliant and you've got the 5, 4, close up, close up, close up, close up, and then the 1 is over the closing titles. I love that. I found a bit less to talk about at some stage of that episode. It was much talkier than I'd remembered. And maybe I'm tired, and I think I probably planned to say more about Roy, and then I didn't, because I didn't want it to just be an obituary show. Whereas actually I could have done. I'm sure you'd have been perfectly fine with that. Anyway, love you, Roy Scammell. Bless you, mate. Oh dear. Does that leave? God, that leaves. Oh no, yeah, Christopher Benjamin and John Levine still with us from that cast list. Jeremy Davis, the designer, is a very nice man too. Right. I have to pause. Pause? Yes. I also have to find, because I spent ages setting up, I actually didn't call up Jeremy, but he should be fairly accessible to me. So hang on. What am I going to? Oh, it's the cliffhanger. That cliffhanger is fantastic. I just think it from the moment the Doctor rips off his mask, everything about that cliffhanger is perfect. And then the icing on the cake is just the fact that the 1 actually goes into the opening titles. And of course, what that means is that they don't actually escape this cliffhanger. Yes, the Doctor doesn't get shot, but actually the Doctor getting shot is in terms of the grand scale of things, is remarkably trivial to what actually. So the Doctor doesn't get shot, but doesn't really matter in the large scale of things, because the cliffhanger has happened, and there's no amount of bounds are going to get them free from it. So let's just find. I think that's Jeremy on episode 3. Inferno, episode 4. So I'm choosing the cliffhanger. What is the marvellous Jeremy, who is in Doctor Who, the TV movie, who has embraced this for all he's worth? Let's see how he's getting on with his own Inferno project.
Well, now having reviewed episode 4 as some form of witness statement from this duplicate Jeremy that has arrived in our cooler, more, fascist universe. It has been quite an entertaining thing. I did enjoy it quite a lot. I suppose what the duplicate Jeremy would say his favorite moments of this episode are, I would have to concur with them, is the performance of the central actor, one Mr. John Pertwee, and his increasing sense of desperation, and particularly, and this is definitely his favorite thing, the delivery of the line, "It's the sound of this planet screaming out its rage," which I have to say was quite enjoyable. It was an interesting, sort of spluttering of rage from this normally cool and collected Doctor, and full of authority, and also just a whiff of desperation. Things are not going well, and I personally, as an underleader, enjoyed seeing someone so obviously moral, so under pressure. So I thought that was quite good. So yes, I agree that line delivery and John Pertwee's performance as a whole was probably both my and the duplicate's favorite moments, albeit for different reasons. It's interesting how often we agree, considering, we are so different. He has, 2 eyes. I have an eye patch, as you can see, and he doesn't have a very convincing mustache in the same way that I do, and yes, seems to be overall slightly more pleasant and less, indefinably from somewhere between the United Kingdom and America. Not entirely a convincing accent on my part, but this is what we all sound like over here. So, what are you going to do? In any ways, I will return with the subsequent episode, and we shall see what our favorite things from that transmission will be. See you soon.
Oh, good to speak with goblins. And he didn't say how their project is going, so I hope he's safe. Alternative World platoon under leader Jeremy Radick there, all the way from Canada. We've never met. We've reached across the world to bond over a brilliant episode of Doctor Who. Yeah, if you haven't seen the Hadoke versus Havoc documentary on the Inferno DVD, please do. I had a great time with the Havoc stunt gentleman, and I was berating myself last episode for choosing Havoc rather than the obvious thing, the alternative world thing. And actually, I now feel slightly vindicated because they are a very important part, and they're a sadly dwindling resource, and we won't see their like again, even if we burrow right to the centre of the earth. Which, if we had, Roy would have insisted on jumping in. I'm sure. I mean, did I even mention last week the first time I met him, he was devising a sport on an ice rink, which was like Chariots of Courage, it was called, and he was thinking about disabled sports people who wouldn't be who would need something to carry them along. So he was sort of a shopping trolley on ice with a hockey stick, and he got hit and he started bleeding. He was like, yeah, it's all right, and he wasn't demonstrative about that. It wasn't oh yeah, I could take anything. It was just, it was all in a day's work. He wasn't even being macho about it. Anyway, he was 80. I really did think he would get to 100 because he was very fit, very healthy, very sharp, still writing scripts. He was trying to interest people in scripts that he was working on. Anyway, Roy Scammell he's gone to the he's I hope when he gets wherever he's going, which I'm sure is up there, he lands on a load of cardboard boxes as he gets there. Okay, I'm going to refill my cup of tea and then I'm going to watch episode 5. I'd love it if you could join me there, which will be in the next edition of Happy Times and Places. But until then, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Goodbye. Thanks so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke, with special guest Jeremy Radick, who's on Twitter @Jeremy Radick. These podcasts would not be possible without the kindness of patrons, who include Anthony Carroll, Warp 1 version, Anthony Carroll, Warp 2 version, an alternative universe version of Phil Chapman. He's just like the other one, but has a different sort of hat on. Nigel Bromley, but with or without a beard, depending on whether Nigel in this universe currently has a beard. David Brody, with a different wig on location to the one in studio. Kyle Bors, just a meaner version. Robin Bland, using his real name. James Blackett, he could talk to dogs in this universe. Martin Bellum of the alternative universe one writes for the Mail. The music for this podcast was by Dave Gates. Or was it? It's harder messing around with the credits than you would think, and I certainly didn't get through everybody, but of course I will list the other patrons on other episodes of this podcast, because that's one of the perks if you go to patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. From as little as £3 a month, you get a name check sometimes. You also get early material. They're months ahead, actually, the patrons, on all the podcast releases. You also get exclusive and bonus stuff, and if you pay for a year in advance, you also get a 10% discount. However, it may not be that you want to subscribe. You could just do a one-off every now and again when you fancy it. You can do that at ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke, and if you can't or don't want to support financially, that's totally understandable. I'm grateful for that there's an audience for this stuff, and thank you for listening and downloading. But you know what costs you nothing? Going to your podcast outlet and giving me 5 shiny stars and perhaps a lovely couple of lines of review. That just really helps to get the word out there. And if people don't know about this stuff, they might be listening to a podcast where somebody from Bucks Fizz discusses the Tomorrow People, because they just don't know that there's a Doctor Who material out there. Though actually now I quite fancy the idea of doing a podcast. You heard it here first. I've thought of sillier ideas when I'm being recorded, he says, looking at his Doctor Who cookbook. But look, yeah, get word out there. I'd be very grateful. But thanks for listening. And I just tell people, tap people on the shoulder on the bus, go, have you ever heard a man chatting through episode 5 of The Dominators? Well, you can now. So, yeah. I'll stop talking now. I'm trying to make these post-credit bits different because I was getting into a rut where I was just saying the same thing. I assume most people stop at the end of the credits anyway. So I could say anything, couldn't I? I could say Justin Timberlake for president. There. See how many people heard that. Bye. And follow these podcasts on Twitter at Hadoke Podcasts. Me at Toby Hadoke, and come to my comedy club in Manchester, UK, 8 p.m. every Tuesday at Excess Malarkey. It's been going for 24 years. It's won loads of awards. It's very, very cheap. Excellent comics as guests, and me extemporising in between like some sort of waffly glue. And if you can't make it because geography is a barrier, don't worry. We went online during lockdown and it was such a success. We're continuing with our online shows. They're going to be once a month at twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey.